what got you into CS in the first place? Because I know we all have our own. Everyone has a different answer, of course. But what got you into this field?
Yeah, so I think at first it was my dad probably. I mentioned he was my mentor. He's been my mentor for like the competitive programming side of things, or like just general software engineering in general, for a very long time throughout college. But at first, he's a software engineer himself, and I kind of saw that, and I think I just decided to take some classes in high school because of it, or like a community college class, and so that was my first motivation, was I think my dad, and just seeing him, and I was like, oh, I should try this out. I think it could be cool, solving these types of problems. And then when I took that community college class, I actually didn't really like it as much as I thought I would. But so when I did take that class, yeah, I did not like it, and I kind of second guessed myself. But I ended up taking another class, and I think it was a web development class. And it was much, I guess, easier than my first class I took, at least. And I ended up just over time, forming my own opinion to enjoy it. I'm not sure what kind of switched to the point where I don't really like it that much, to the point where like I do like it. I think a lot of it for me at first was I was really scared of how much I touched on this earlier, but really scared of like, oh damn, I really don't know this stuff. I don't really know this stuff. And I was really scared about that. But then over time I realized how it wasn't as bad as I thought it would be in terms of difficulty. I think the difficulty really scared me at first. So over time, when I actually got to college now, and I built my first project, that's that clicking point, I think. When I built my first like website, it was actually in a hackathon, spring term freshman year, I decided, okay, I'm just going to go and try to build something by myself. And that's that clicking point where like, oh, I could really I can do stuff and teach myself this stuff and go out on my own and build something that's cool, or that I thought was cool at the time. And that for me was that point where I was like, yeah, like this is what I like. I love doing this. Like I pretty much have the world at my fingertips. And CS, if you think about it, you have the world at your fingertips. You can learn anything you want. You just Google search away, and you can pretty much ask any question. Someone's tried to ask that question before. You can go down a rabbit hole and learn as much as you want in that area. And you can do it to build a project, and it's not that difficult to build a project. Or it is difficult, but like it's not as hard as going to like get a degree first. Then you have to learn all this stuff before you can go do a project. Like you can do it pretty early on in your CS career, and at your computer. It's not that like you don't have to go buy resources or get funding. It's free. So that's the biggest motivator, I'd say. The project side of it, personal project side of it. I'm curious for you, what would you say yours is actually? Because I don't think I've heard your personal motivation.
My personal motivation? I guess, here, I'll ask you a question. That was kind of a follow-up. And
Sure.
If you have a different answer to mine, then I'll share my aspect. But
Okay.
I guess what will be your favorite part of making projects? Like what's your passion behind that? And is there like a particular aspect that you enjoy the most when it comes to developing these things?
Yeah, I think for me, it's the thinking I'm solving a problem or a problem for someone. And I think at first for me, it was solving my own problems. So I think my first app, like I mentioned, it was a hackathon project. It was just something I thought it could be useful. And it was a dorm review website. You could look, it allocates all the Google reviews for dorm reviews at OSU. And you can just see this page, get an AI generated summary for it. That I thought would be pretty useful for students, incoming students, for myself. I was like, damn, I wish I had this. So I would say that. And then it kind of transitioned into wanting or being able to build stuff for myself. So I think my second project was a Rate My Professor extension.
I still use that to this day.
Yeah,
it's crazy,
really
dude.
good. It saves so much time. And
if you guys haven't seen it, go on. It's on the web store, right?
Yeah, if you just search up Rate My Professor extension, it's probably the first one that shows up.
This guy made an extension for Rate My Professor. I think everyone we know uses it, and it's like so useful for just like when you're trying to register for those classes and you don't want to like leave the class registering website and like check the rate my professor like rating. It just shows it like in the like site itself, which is like it saves so much time. It's helped so many people, and I guess you can continue with that, but
Yeah.
stuff like that, right? Yeah.
Yeah. Havel summarized it pretty well. Yeah, it just saves a lot of time. You don't have to copy and paste professor names. You can just see it right there as if it were a part of the web page.
Yeah.
It is a Chrome specific thing though, so if you don't have Chrome, sorry. I think like some Chromium web based browsers like Arc or something use it, but yeah. So so just building projects that were useful to myself are actually a really big motivator as well. And then now I just try to target. There's not a lot of stuff, like a lot of problems I need to solve for myself. So I try and think a lot about what's useful for other people. And if it's useful for myself too, it's great. But those are the projects that I work on really. And that give me the most motivation. If it's just a random project that is like, oh, build a clone of YouTube or build like a page with some text and blah, blah, blah. Like if it's something that you don't think is useful yourself, you're probably not going to have enough motivation to work on it. At least for me, that's my experience. So yeah.
I mean, that's the same that was the answer I was going to give
Really?
too. I really feel like my favorite aspect of all this is solving problems for people. Our main pitch for Hackathon Club when people are coming in is there a problem that you want to see solved in the world right now, in your community, something that interests you? Well, then Hackathon is the best way to actually make those projects happen, right? Like all hackathons are is just solving problems basically that you see around you. And I feel like that's what engineering at its core is. That's what we do, and that's what brings us joy.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of people, there are like extrinsic motivators and like superficial things like, like getting that big tech internship, getting a ton of money, getting paid, maybe the status that comes with being an engineer. But at its core, like there are other professions where you can get those things, but the reason why you choose to be an engineer is so you can solve problems.
Mm-hmm.
And I feel like that for me is just the biggest part of it. And, I feel like club leadership has been kind of an aspect where we do that, but, the technical side definitely has its own benefits as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think something I want to touch on is, I guess reflecting a little far back to what I was first mentioning about like my motivation. I think at first I was very motivated by fear, being very fearful for my future, or I guess wanting the most out of my future, right? I wanted the most out of my future. I was like, just basically wanting the most out of my future. I want a good job after college. That's kind of what brought me to CS at first. Very fear-oriented motivation. But over time, that kind of grew into love. It kind of touches something I've been realizing a lot is, I think you can kind of bring motivation down to like two main things. And I think it's being fearful or loving something, or basically fear and love. And if you look at it that way, I think fear does have like a purpose, because it brings you past that first barrier of a lot of the stuff, that first barrier that kind of like pushes you to do something. And then over time, it kind of grows into that love. Is it out of battery?
Yeah. Did it turn off?
Yeah. But yeah, so
okay, we'll keep with the audio, I guess.
Yeah, so I think, if you look at it from that perspective, I think they have two purposes, right? Like, this is kind of getting like a weird conversation path, but I'm curious to hear if you resonate with this. But I think there's purposes for both, but you probably want to maximize how much you focus on the things you love, or what you love out of something, because that gives you just more, like we're talking about the motivation now, I think, is being able to build cool stuff for people. I would attribute that to something that's like a love motivation. and that brings a lot of fulfillment.
So I'm gonna pause you right there, Caleb. Could you like get the camera on him? Just switch between us, I guess. Yeah. Okay, keep going. Sorry.
Yeah. So to summarize what I was saying is, and I'm curious to hear your thoughts, but try to attribute. I would say trying to attribute to a lot of the things that you're doing to what you love out of it is pretty important.
Yeah.
And it actually motivates you more that way. I think love is actually a bigger motivator than fear, but getting to that love motivator is really difficult.
Ooh, yes.
But so fear pushes you to that love motivation. But anyway, I'm just curious, what part of that resonated with you? What are your thoughts on that?
I think, okay, that's a lot of deep stuff in there. Really good stuff. I feel like when you're doing something out of necessity, it makes it really difficult to, first of all, if you're not enjoying it, you're not going to be doing it as long. Take like vector calc, for example. You know, we care about CS stuff. Vector calc is kind of out of the way. We didn't really have too great of a time in the class, but we knew people who got like perfect scores on all the tests, and those people like really love doing vector calc stuff. You know, they like when I would talk to them about it, they would be like super passionate about like the concepts we were learning. They would go like really deep into it. They would be like, "Oh, this is light for me." Whereas for you and me, it's like we're sitting here like, okay, it's time to open up the vector notebook and then just like start taking notes and doing that stuff, and that made it significantly more difficult to stay committed to it. You know, it was like a chore, right? But again, like you said, if you love what you do and you actually have fun solving problems, then I feel like you're going to go so much farther in terms of success, you know?
Yeah, I'd say like try to find what you love out of it. Like I mentioned earlier, like try to find what you love out of CS. That's the most important thing. I will challenge your thought though of people, the people that did well in that class the only people who did well in that class ended up loving it. Because, well, not the only, but most people. But I will say I think people can survive, or not survive, but can thrive in a fear-based motivation. It really depends. Like, I think that's where discipline comes in. But some people just train themselves to, like, be motivated that much by fear or become fearful earlier. Because I guess if you think about it, maybe the times where you struggle in the class, it might have been that you might have slacked off at a certain point and not taking the time to do it at that point, or an earlier point, or an assignment or whatever, or study or whatever. But some people, I guess, become fearful earlier. But so I think fear would be able to motivate people, but some people just don't become fearful until much later, and it ends up hurting them.
Yeah.
So I would say I resonate a lot with that, but I will say there's pushing through that, or having fear being your like primary motivator, or being able to push through fear ends up like making you less fulfilled, I'd say. Like maybe you can attribute it to like a fear, to like being okay with fear. But I wouldn't say over time, I feel like a lot of people would really struggle if they constantly try and pummel themselves with like fear-based things. I guess that's why a lot of people struggle in school.
Do you think?
Yeah.
I think with like, if we take like the vector calc example, I think I definitely agree with you where someone who does it out of love or someone who does it out of fear could get the same results as someone who does it out of love, for the same reasons that you said. But if we take the fear and love aspect to something less rigid than like school and tests, something like starting a business or something like that. If I were to start a business in something that I am not really interested in, do you think that, and like you were to start a business in something that you love, do you think we could see varying levels of success there in something long term?
Yeah, I think there's probably studies on this, but to give an intuitive thought, I'd say, yeah, it's probably true. But it'd be interesting to look up after. But yeah, I'd say like in the long run, maybe the question is like, do people who it'd probably be hard to make a study on it, because I feel like if you're doing something out of fear, you're probably struggling in making a business, for example, like the example you gave. You're probably struggling somewhere where like you feel like you have to make a business to succeed.
Right.
There's probably more people that like are struggling at that point. Whereas if you're making a business out of love, it's probably more likely that you're coming from a good spot in life. But anyway, that's an interesting question. To kind of sidetrack, I want to think about how each of those affects the person, like affects you or me. Like, how does each one affect you?
Like each
if
one
you
of
feel
each
like,
one of what? Like,
yeah, like how does fear-based motivation affect your emotions?
Ooh.
Versus love-based, and maybe just in your life, how much would you say you are motivated more by fear or love, like in your life, in any aspect, all aspects, and how you feel about that? Yeah.
I think. Wow. Okay. Here we go.
Oh.
So when it comes to, I feel like a lot of like classes and things, that's definitely fear-based, because that's where procrastination comes from, right? It's like, I don't want to do this and I kind of have to do this. But I definitely feel like when there's something I'm passionate about, right? Like when I first came into this like hackathon position, I feel like this is the best example. When I first came in here, I was in a position where, okay, maybe I am doing it for the resume. You know, I just want to get, I know that Tom has told me this is the way to succeed. This is the way you get ahead. And if I want to, you know, land those internships, do those jobs in the future, this is one step to getting there. But then as I started to do it, I started to kind of fall in love with this community and these people. And I started to realize, hey, like I actually want to help people and do these things. And now if we take this podcast, for example, you know, we're going to be, right after this podcast, we're going to be going home and we're going to be spending the night, like, editing all this footage together, figuring all this stuff out. We got to get all this gear and, like, all the effort that it takes. It's like, you can't put in this much effort and not be exhausted and feel fulfilled after it.
Right.
But since we do enjoy it, we still feel exhausted and we're still super tired, but it's like, it's that sigh of relief at the end of the hackathon, at the end of whatever you do, at the end of like a long night of doing this work. You're like, okay, what I'm doing actually matters, you know? But that's my side on it. I feel like,
I think moral of the story is probably find what you love about CS, and that will put you more ahead. Spend time thinking about what you like, or spend time finding what you like.
Yeah.
Moral of the story.